My brother mocked my job in front of everyone at Thanksgiving, while my dad told me not to embarrass the family. My name is Kalia. I am 26. And to them that means I should have a real job by now. A real job in their minds comes with a suit, a badge, and a boss who can brag about you over dinner. I do not have any of that. I work alone in a small apartment with a microphone and a laptop. And somehow that is enough for my brother to treat me like the family disappointment. This year he walked in with a new girlfriend on his arm, all smiles and polite questions. And for some reason, everyone kept glancing at me like they were waiting for a show. After a while of him bragging about his numbers at work, she finally turned to me and asked, "So what do you do?" I drew a breath to answer, but my dad cut across the table and said, "Do not embarrass us tonight." The whole table burst out laughing. My brother smirked and added, "Maybe lie this time so you do not sound so pathetic." I sat there with my face burning while my own family laughed at the life I built. And I just smiled and took a sip of my drink. A few minutes later, his girlfriend pulled out her phone to show everyone her favorite podcast for long drives, hit play, and my voice filled the room. She froze, stared at the screen, then at me, and suddenly the laughter stopped and their faces went pale. If your family has ever turned your work into a joke, keep listening, because that night was the last time they laughed at my job without consequences. When I finally got back to my apartment that night, the silence hit me harder than the cold. I tossed my keys on the counter and just stood there in the dark, hearing my own voice echoing in my head from the living room a few hours earlier. One second my brother was laughing about how I should lie about my job, and the next second his girlfriend was playing her favorite podcast, and my voice rolled out of her phone like some kind of ghost. She looked at me with her eyes wide. My parents shifted in their seats. And for the first time all night, nobody had anything funny to say. I did not explain it. I just shrugged, said it sounded familiar, and watched the color drain from their faces. My brother changed the subject so fast you would have thought the house was on fire. Driving home afterward, the street lights smeared across the windshield, and every red light felt like another small insult I had swallowed over the years. My brother's name is Ethan. He is 31, works in corporate sales for an insurance company, and my parents talk about him the way some people talk about movie stars. My dad, Robert, loves telling people about Ethan's bonuses and his promotion. My mom, Linda, collects little stories about his clients and his important calls. I am the opposite of that. I am the kid who dropped out of the Safe Business program, moved into a tiny place in Portland, and started recording stories in a closet lined with cheap foam panels. They call what I do messing around with a microphone. They say it like I am a child banging on pots and pans in the kitchen. What they do not know is that the channel Ethan's girlfriend played at dinner, the one called Midnight Mirror, is mine. 2.3 million people subscribe. I write and record stories about family drama, betrayal, and revenge, all in a calm voice that never says my real name. Anonymous host, faceless avatar. It is the only reason I have the money to pay my rent, buy my own health insurance, and cover the student loans they stopped caring about. A couple of years ago, I tried to tell them I was so proud when I hit my first 100,000 subscribers. I showed them the analytics, the sponsorship proposals, the emails from listeners saying my stories helped them feel less alone. My dad laughed and asked when I was going to start looking for a real job instead of playing radio in my bedroom. My mom suggested I apply at the local bank as a teller. Ethan said, "Maybe you can put your podcast on your resume under hobbies." That was the night I decided they did not deserve front row seats to my life. So I stopped sharing anything real. At Thanksgiving, when my voice accidentally slipped into their perfect little bubble, it felt like the universe had briefly pulled back the curtain for them. They did not know what they were hearing, not fully, but they knew something did not add up. They knew I was not as small as the box they kept trying to shove me into. Standing in my dark kitchen with the fridge humming behind me, I realized I was done waiting for them to understand. I could not make them respect me, but I could decide what they got to see and what they did not. And maybe, just maybe, I could make sure that the next time they heard my voice, they would finally understand what they had been laughing at all along. The days after Thanksgiving, I did something I had never done before with my family. I went quiet on purpose. No follow-up texts asking if they got home safe. No little jokes in the group chat. When my mom sent a message about leftover turkey and how I should come by to pick some up, I let it sit unread. Instead, I poured everything into the life they refused to see. My mornings in Portland always start the same way. I wake up before the sun comes up, make a mug of cheap coffee, and sit at my desk by the window with a notebook. The city is still half asleep, and that is when the stories come easiest. I outline scripts, sketch out characters, and flip through emails from listeners who want me to tell their stories. People write from all over the world. A woman whose sister stole her inheritance. A man whose parents refused to acknowledge his wife for 10 years. A kid whose uncle mocked his art until it was featured in a gallery. I change names, details, locations, but the feelings are always real. Around 9, I step into my little recording corner, pull the microphone in front of me, and let my voice turn strangers' pain into something structured and bearable. Calm, measured, almost soothing. You would never guess that the person speaking once went home from Thanksgiving with her jaw clenched so tight she gave herself a headache. That week, in the middle of the usual stream of listener stories and sponsor pitches, an email popped up with a subject line that made me blink. Exclusive series proposal from Emberwave Audio. Emberwave is a major podcast platform, one of the big ones that puts their logo on billboards and subway ads. I opened the email and read it twice. They wanted to develop a limited series with me under the Midnight Mirror brand about family expectations and the cost of being the disappointment. They had listened to one of my recent uploads about a girl whose parents mocked her career choice at a holiday dinner and said the response was huge. They wanted 10 episodes, creative control mostly in my hands, and a payout that made my hands shake when I did the math. I stared at my screen, thinking about my dad complaining that I did not have a boss. If only he knew I was about to sign a contract with several pages of legal language and more than his first salary. I wrote back trying to sound normal and scheduled a video call for the next day. When the Zoom meeting started, my camera off and my avatar floating in the corner, the Emberwave team was all smiles. They called me by my channel name, said they respected my anonymity, and talked about how listeners clung to my stories because they felt seen. They suggested a title for the series, Family Lines. I liked it. While they talked about release dates and cross-promotion, I could not help thinking about my family table, my brother's smirk, and my dad's voice telling me not to embarrass them. They had no idea they had just handed me the core of an entire series. One of the producers mentioned that they were exploring brand partners who valued self-worth and healthy boundaries. I almost laughed. My phone buzzed on the desk. A new email. This one from a brand name I recognized, a clean skincare company that does big campaigns online. The sender was a brand strategist named Harper James. She said she loved my channel and wanted to talk about a possible collaboration for a New Year campaign about self-respect and not letting others define your worth. The name hit me like a splash of cold water. Harper, Ethan's new girlfriend. At Thanksgiving, she had casually mentioned working in marketing for a skincare brand in Seattle. She had not known who I was when she played my podcast at the table, but obviously she knew the channel. Now she was emailing the voice behind it. I leaned back in my chair and let that sink in. My brother's girlfriend was a fan of the fake job he had mocked 10 minutes earlier. She had literally brought my work into the room as proof that I mattered without even realizing it. I typed back agreeing to a meeting. I kept my tone neutral and professional. No hint that I had seen her pass the mashed potatoes. No hint that she had watched my parents laugh at me while my face burned. The further I moved into the world that actually valued what I did, the smaller my parents' living room began to feel in my memory. The silence from my family over the next 2 weeks was almost funny. They must have sensed my distance, but they did not ask why. My mom sent a couple of messages about Christmas plans, dropping hints about my dad's new outdoor grill, and how Ethan might bring Harper again. I answered with short, polite replies. I'm not sure yet. Work is busy. My dad called once, clearly hoping to talk about Thanksgiving casually, like nothing had happened. I let it go to voicemail. On the recording, he sounded annoyed, but tried to cover it. He said, I should not take jokes so seriously. He reminded me that family is all you have. I deleted the message and went back to editing a story about a girl who stopped going home for holidays because they kept treating her like a failure. Sometimes I think the universe has a dark sense of humor. While my parents were making plans for another perfect family gathering, I was recording the first episode of Family Lines, a story that started with a brother mocking his sister's job across a table full of food. I changed the details enough to protect myself, but the bones of it were real. It was not petty. It was simply the truth told in a calm voice. released into a world that understood me better than my own family ever tried to. When Emberwave uploaded the first episode, the response was immediate. Comments poured in from people who said they had lived the same scene in their own homes. The episode made its way to Reddit, where someone posted about how satisfying it was to hear a narrator refuse to play the grateful black sheep role anymore. My listener numbers jumped. The Skinner brand set a call for the following week. By the time that day came, I had already recorded 3 more Family Lines episodes. Each one dug a little deeper into the ways family can weaponize love and expectations. The call with Harper's team was all business at first. She sounded bright and confident, explaining how their New Year campaign would focus on shedding shame and toxic expectations. They wanted a calm storytelling voice that already had an audience, and they saw Midnight Mirror as the perfect fit. My camera stayed off as usual. I watched her little square in the corner of my screen, her name beneath it, remembered her smile over the turkey, and the way she had looked at me when my voice came out of her phone. She had not connected the two then, not quite. Now she was talking about how my stories help people feel less alone in their families. She said there was one episode in particular that hit her hard, the Thanksgiving one. She mentioned the line about a dad telling his daughter not to embarrass the family and a brother suggesting she lie. She said, "That one sounded so real it made my stomach hurt." For a second I forgot I was supposed to be anonymous. I almost laughed. I swallowed it and kept my voice steady. I told her I write from a mix of submissions and personal experience, that holidays are complicated for a lot of people. She agreed so quickly I knew she had her own scars. We talked about script ideas and how my narration would weave through the visuals. At one point she said, "My boyfriend's family can be kind of intense, so I really relate." She did not say Ethan's name, but I heard him in the tired sigh underneath her joke. It was strange realizing that the girl who sat at our table watching my family treat me like a punchline was now building a whole campaign around the kind of hurt my channel talks about every week. When the call ended, the contract they sent over made it official. I would write and narrate 3 pieces for their campaign. They would pay me more for those 3 scripts than my parents had ever earned in a year when we were kids. Emberwave would promote the series and the campaign. It was the kind of thing people in my space dream about. I signed with a real pen, even though a digital signature would have been fine, just because I wanted to feel it in my hand. As December rolled on, I barely looked up from my laptop. I recorded late into the night. My voice turned into a tool instead of a target. The Family Line series climbed the charts. The skincare campaign team sent me early cuts of the videos with my narration layered over close-ups of real people washing off makeup and writing down things they were letting go of, like shame and guilt, and the need to please everyone. The first time I heard my own voice say the word family over their logo, I thought of my dad telling me I was embarrassing them. My phone buzzed again. Another message from my mom asking if I was coming for Christmas Eve. She said Ethan and Harper would be there. My first instinct was to say no, to stay in my safe little apartment, eat takeout, and watch other people post about their perfect or not so perfect families. But there was a part of me that wanted to walk back into that living room with the full weight of my real life behind me. Not to rub it in, just to stop pretending I was still the failure they had built in their minds. I texted back that I would come for dinner. The night of the Christmas gathering, the house looked exactly the same. The same lights wrapped around the porch posts, the same wreath on the front door, the same smell of ham and cinnamon and pine when I stepped inside. Ethan was already there in a pressed shirt, drink in hand. Harper stood next to him, a little more reserved than I remembered. My mom hurried over with a too bright smile. My dad patted my shoulder like he was doing me a favor just by touching me. They asked about traffic and the weather. Nobody mentioned Thanksgiving. Nobody mentioned the moment my voice had filled the room from Harper's phone. At the table, Ethan slid right back into his favorite role. He talked about his sales numbers and his clients, about how he was being considered for a bigger position next year. My parents soaked it up. At one point he smirked and asked how my little online thing was going. My dad chuckled and said, "Still playing radio up in Portland." I was about to answer when Harper set her fork down very gently and looked straight at me. "Actually," she said, "I have been meaning to thank you." Her voice cut through the conversation so cleanly that even the TV in the living room felt like it got quieter. My mom frowned in confusion. Ethan looked between us. Harper went on, "Your voice has been saving my department for the past month." My dad blinked. "What?" She reached into her bag, grabbed the remote, and pointed it at the TV in the corner. I had noticed earlier that they had some generic Christmas movie playing in the background. Harper switched the input to a streaming app and pulled up the Emberwave homepage. Right there on the front banner was the promo for Family Lines with the Midnight Mirror logo and a tagline about breaking free from toxic expectations. She hit the volume and pressed play. My own voice poured out of the speakers, calm and steady, saying the opening lines of the series. There was no mistaking it this time, no casual shrug, no pretending it just sounded similar. My mom's fork froze halfway to her mouth. My dad stared at the TV like it had personally insulted him. Ethan went pale, then red, then pale again. Harper muted it after a few seconds and said, "My company has been running a huge campaign this month using Chloe's narration. Her channel is one of the biggest on Emberwave right now. Our New Year numbers are already better than last year because of her stories." My mom opened her mouth, closed it again. My dad finally managed, "You mean that little show she does?" Harper shook her head. "It is not a little show. It is a business." She looked at Ethan and there was something new in her eyes, something sharper. "Did you know your sister reaches millions of people a week? Did you know the story she told about a family mocking their daughter at Thanksgiving went viral?" Ethan stammered that he had not realized it was that big of a deal. He tried to laugh it off, saying it was just internet stuff. I let him talk for a second, then I spoke. "My channel paid for this year's taxes, my retirement account, and the down payment on a future house," I said. "It paid for the student loans you told me were my problem alone. It is paying me more for one series than you made in your first 5 years at that company, Ethan." The room went very quiet. I did not raise my voice. I did not have to. My mom whispered, "Why did you not tell us?" I looked at her, really looked, and saw panic and shame wrestling behind her eyes. "Because the last time I tried you laughed," I said. "You told me to get a real job. Dad called it playing radio. Ethan told me I could put it under hobbies on a resume. So I decided my work was not for you. It was for people who actually listened." My dad shifted in his chair. He started to say he had just been joking, that I was taking things too seriously again. Harper cut in before I could answer. She turned to Ethan. "Is that how you talk about me when I am not around? Is that how you talk about my industry too?" He sputtered. "No, of course not. This is different. It is family. We just tease." Harper stared at him for a long moment, then looked back at the TV where Emberwave's logo glowed under my channel name. "My boss knows who Midnight Mirror is," she said quietly. "He told me last week that getting this collaboration was the best thing I had done all quarter. Your company is trying to pitch a partnership to us next year. Do you understand how bad it looks that you sit here and laugh at the person we are building campaigns around?" My brother had no answer for that. My dad looked like he wanted to disappear into the carpet. My mom dabbed at the corner of her eye with a napkin. I felt a strange calm settle over me. This was not about revenge in the way they thought. I was not there to humiliate them. I was just finally letting reality have the floor. The rest of dinner limped along under a thick blanket of awkward silence. Harper barely touched her food. Ethan made a couple of weak attempts at small talk that went nowhere. When the plates were cleared and my mom brought out dessert, Harper stood up and said she needed some air. I followed her onto the porch. The cold hit my face like a wake-up slap. She crossed her arms and stared at the lights in the yard. "I am sorry," she said, "for what they said to you, for not saying anything at Thanksgiving." I shrugged. "You did not owe me that," I said, even though a part of me had wanted someone, anyone at that table, to speak up. She shook her head. "I should have." She hesitated, then added, "I knew something was off that night. The way they looked at you, the way Ethan laughed. Listening to your episodes afterward just made it worse." We stood there for a minute, our breath fogging the air. Finally, she said, "I cannot be with someone who talks about people like that, especially when my entire job is about telling women that their worth is not defined by anyone else." I knew what she meant before she said it. When Ethan came out a few minutes later to check on us, she ended it with a few steady, quiet sentences. She did not scream. She did not make a scene. She simply told him that his attitude toward me, toward my work, and toward his own privilege was not something she wanted to build a life around. He tried to blame it on his upbringing, on jokes that went too far. But she did not budge. Watching him flail for the right words, It hit me that he was finally feeling a fraction of what it was like to have your reality dismissed by someone you thought loved you. I did not feel sorry for him. Not exactly, but I recognized the look. A few weeks later, after the holidays, I heard through a mutual friend that Ethan's company did not move forward on the partnership they had been courting with Harper's brand. Apparently, when the agency asked Harper privately whether she trusted the team on his side, she did not exactly give him a glowing recommendation. He kept his job, but the promotion he had been bragging about quietly evaporated. Officially, it was because the company was restructuring. Unofficially, everyone knew that leadership had decided to push people who embodied the values they were selling, not undermine them at home. My dad never said a word about that. My mom never brought up Harper again. But the next time my channel released a new Family Lines episode, I saw 2 new subscribers come in with names that looked a lot like Robert and Linda. A few months passed. I moved into a slightly bigger apartment with an actual office instead of a corner in my bedroom. The Emberwave series finished its run and got picked up for a second season. The skincare campaign won an industry award for storytelling, and they asked me to consult on their next one. I started running small online workshops teaching other creators how to build anonymous brands, how to protect themselves while sharing stories that mattered. Every once in a while, my phone would light up with a text from Ethan. He kept them short and casual. Hey, hope you are doing well. Do you have any advice for someone trying to build a personal brand? Think you could maybe introduce me to someone at Emberwave? I always answered politely, but I never gave him what he was really asking for. I told him there were plenty of free resources online. I suggested he start by listening more and speaking less. I did not offer to put my name on the line for someone who had only ever used it as a punchline. My parents, for their part, eventually sent a long email. My mom wrote most of it. She said they had listened to Family Lines. She said some of the episodes were hard to hear because they recognized themselves in the parents who brushed off their children's pain as sensitivity or drama. She apologized for calling my work a phase, for acting like love meant pushing me into a mold instead of supporting the person I actually was. My dad added a short paragraph at the end. He did not use the word sorry, but he admitted he had been wrong about what counts as a real job. He said he was proud that I was able to support myself doing something I created. I read the message twice. It did not fix the years of being laughed at. It did not erase the Thanksgiving where he told me not to embarrass them, but it was something. I replied and said I appreciated the apology. I told them I was open to staying in touch, but I needed them to understand that my life was not a project for them to evaluate anymore. I would visit when I felt ready, not out of obligation. I would share what I wanted to share, not what they demanded. They said they understood. Maybe they did, maybe they did not. What mattered was that I finally believed it myself. The strangest part of all of this was how many people heard the shape of my story without ever knowing it was mine. Under every Family Lines episode, thousands of comments stacked up. People wrote about getting mocked for majoring in art, about being told their small businesses were just hobbies, about sitting at tables where everyone praised the kid with the office job and ignored the one who built something on their own. They thanked me for putting words to something they had never been able to explain. They said things like, "Hearing this makes me feel less crazy." It was not just me. That was the point. My revenge was never really about making my brother lose a girlfriend or a promotion. Those things happened as a natural consequence of who he chose to be when he thought there would never be a price. What I wanted more than anything was to stop living as the ashamed version of myself they had written. I wanted my work to be real, not because they finally saw it, but because I did. If you have ever had someone laugh at your dreams across a table filled with food, if you have ever been told to lie about who you are so you do not embarrass the people who are supposed to love you, you already know how heavy that fork can feel in your hand. Here is what I learned. You do not have to convince them. You do not have to drag them to understanding. You build the life that makes sense to you. You surround yourself with people who see you clearly, and you set boundaries with those who refuse. Sometimes life will line things up so that the people who mocked you are forced to see exactly what they were laughing at. Their faces might go pale. They might lose things they thought were guaranteed. That is not your job to manage. Your job is to keep telling your story in whatever form that takes, and to remember that their inability to see your value does not erase